Let's talk fascinating deck building decisions made by MHA top cutters for the Rochester RLE. I've got part 1 today with decks 16 through 9. I'll be doing part 2 tomorrow. At 16, we have Garrett with Void Midnight, and Garrett was running 4 copies of Getting a Tour. I thought this was very neat. This Getting a Tour was a card that I really enjoyed when I played Sealed at the HLC event, but I haven't really played in any decks since then, and here Getting a Tour is being run at not just a 1 or 2x, but it's being run at a 4x, which makes a lot of sense because it says your attack with 3 or less speed gets +1 speed, and most of Garrett's attacks are attacks with 3 or less speed. Shrapnel Tooth, Twin Sword Slicer, we got the throws, Grasping Tape Toss, and Binding Armbar. We have Hardened Uppercut, which only starts as 3 speed. So this makes sense to give your attack speed, and then you can give your attacks even more speed with Midnight for the keywords, and it also protects your tech pieces that you need on stage, because after your rival tries to selectively commit one of them, you can flip and ready that foundation, which we are running a lot of tech pieces on the Void symbol. And this is something the Void symbol really excels at. It has a lot of different answers, but in the wrong types of matchups, having these cards, some cards can feel like they don't belong, but then you really want them in other matchups. So here Garrett is running 24 cards at just a 1x. So if we remove the 1x cards, we end up with a list that looks like this, much, much smaller. So the entire list is 75 cards, and if we remove the 1-ups, we get down to 51 cards, which means that Garrett's running 24 cards at a 1x, which is actually a pretty good strategy on the Void symbol when you have cards like First Impressions, Learning the Standard, Spooky, Dissolving the Conflict, Pass Through Walls, Prone to Dry Ice, Citywide Crisis. These are cards that sometimes feel great, sometimes don't feel so great. And so just putting it at a 1x gives you the chance to draw it and get it when you need it. I also liked the throw, weapon / punch kind of attack combo. A lot of times when I try to build Void Midnight, and I'm not an experienced Midnight player by any means, but the first thing I do is put Rejuvenating Smash because Midnight gets to take advantage of getting the free momentum from it. And it has 3 keywords. And then I put in repeated 100% smash. And then I look at the other punches, I get disappointed, and then I stop making the Void Midnight list. But you don't have to just keep yourself to the punch symbol to run Rejuvenating. You can definitely just slide it into lists like this with weapons and throws. You don't need to have a mono keyword with Midnight. All that matters is that you have lots of keywords. And it was nice to see another list running Twin Sword Slicer, not just Kevin Broberg's list. But here we have it because you can get, your free momentum from Rejuvenating, play a Twin Sword Slicer and echo it. And then Slicer can be like a 6 damage move because it's adding the 2 damage if you combo it. Also, we have quite a bit of deadlock with Binding Armbar, Grasping Tape Toss, Fruit of Our Labors. And so this, you can see the core engine of the list here. And then here was the list as a whole. At number 15, we have Constantine on Evil Toya. And Constantine was running 3 copies of Maximum Overhaul despite playing Toya. And he was not playing any copies of Toya's ultra rare Borrowed Goods. Very, very interesting. Because when you think about Maximum Overhaul, you typically think like it's only an overhaul attack because the second enhance is gated to just him. And then the top enhance is gated to people who can play from outside their hand, which Toya can. But typically, the first thing you think of is, I'm going to be picking up attacks with Maximum Overhaul. But that's not necessarily what Constantine was thinking here. He's thinking, I just need to pick up block zones, or I need to pick up some of these tech pieces that I flipped, and I want to play them again and get them unflipped. Or I don't want to get into deadlock. There's a lot of versatility here with Maximum Overhaul beyond just drawing attacks from your stage, especially on a symbol like the Evil symbol that really struggles with card draw. That's why we see Vile Seizing being such a essential attack on the Evil symbol. One thing to note is that Constantine was running 3 copies of Chronostasis Trigger during the Swiss rounds, but then was surprised to find out that it was not actually in the official list that he sent in because he had made his list at like 3 a.m. the night before, and he said Trigger was one of the very first cards he added, but thinks he fat-fingered it on his phone and accidentally took it out. So Trigger is, of course, an Evil staple at this point, but it's not on the official list, but he was playing it in the Swiss rounds. Other than this, we have a very versatile Evil list. I really like the inclusion of 2 Hero Killer, especially as Overhaul tech, so that when Overhaul builds down, you can remove that foundation, or if you're playing like Life Overhaul, You can get rid of passing the torch this way. But yeah, the evil symbol has just gotten really, really solid lately. As long as you can overcome the lack of draw and the lack of card pool clearing that the symbol offers, then you're in a good spot. Number 14, we have Robert on Fire Rappa. And Robert was running the 2-check Charged Shield Breaker. Very, very neat, just 1 week after it becomes legal. 2 mid-7, but it's getting a speed for each of your rivals' ready foundations, so it can very quickly become like a 12 mid-7 and just insane stats. It's nice for Rappa because Rappa's not giving damage onto his attacks, so Rappa really likes these 7 damage or more attacks. And then it's a 2-check, but Rappa's already running bullet punches. So once you're running 4 2-checks, what does it really matter to add on 3 more? You know, you don't care if you check bad if you're Rappa, as long as it's not on your build turn. And then even on your build turn, a lot of the foundations here are spam foundations. You know, a lot of these, it looks like we have a lot of 2 diffs, but 4 out of the 6 2 diffs that we're running are only a 1 of. So most of our foundations are 1s and 0s. We really don't care about the 2-check. We don't care about checking bad. We're Rappa. We'll be okay. And we're also playing cards like Muscle Mauler. Downward Frostspike is very neat. This is like a pseudo 7 damage move. And then, of course, we have the 4 kind of essential Fire Rappa attacks: Barrage, Rapid, Blue Flame Palm Strike, and Bullet Punches. But this is a Rappa list that, you know, the other Rappa list was looking to draw as many cards as possible and win early. This seems to be a Rappa list that is okay, taking its time and going to turn 3 or turn 4, and not necessarily winning right away. And now we have Ryan on Air Juro. Air Juro's been a pretty solved list, I feel like, for a long time. Most of the cards are set 1 and set 2 cards. What really it comes down to for these Air Juro lists is which attacks are you playing and which attacks are you leaving out. So most Juro lists are running Indiscriminate Shock, but here we see Ryan is not running Indiscriminate Shock, and he's also only got like 1 copy of Amplified Sound Blast. He's not running Instant Explosive Release, and he's not, there's one more. Anyway, yeah, all the Juro lists feel like, here's your 10 attacks. Which 6 or 7 will you run, and which 3 or 4 are you going to leave out of your list? Some lists leave out Electric Jolt, like I think the Gen Con list was leaving out Electric Jolt. We see other lists playing Zero Gravity Release. Zero Gravity Release isn't in this one. We see some that aren't playing 4 Comets or 4 Double Jabs. Yeah, so we see some playing Pillar Swings at like 4x or leaving them out. That's really the only difference between the Juro lists. Here we're leaving out Indiscriminate Shock. We're putting Airstream Driver. Driver can get to 9 damage, and it's going to get even more damage from Juro. And it feels nicer than Indiscriminate in some cases because it can be 6 speed instead of only 3 speed, which is, you know, the main downside of Indiscriminate Shock. And you can seal a rival asset or foundation if you have momentum. And Juro does a pretty good job of having momentum with Electric Jolt. And then we have the only set 5 card in the list is Nice Try here at a 2 of. Oh, never mind. And the big 3 at a 2 of. Okay, so we got 4 set 5 cards. At number 12, we have Devon on Death Bakugo 3, the first time Bakugo 3 has ever topped. And Bakugo 3 is able to flip 3 of his foundations to draw 2 cards if he has less cards in hand than his rival, I believe. And so Devon is running a lot of spam foundations. We hardly have any 2 or 3 diffs, although we are running them at a 4x because draw is so needed in this list. We just want to play every single attack that we draw because we can easily clear our progressive. We have Dual Needle Lunge, which gets itself out of our card pool. Nitro Ignition, which gets itself out of our card pool. We're going to be using Bakugos to get attacks out of our card pool, and then we're going to be making these massive stun grenades, and Stun Grenade helps draw us attacks. Very, very nice, and then we can hit them at the end with that Howitzer Impact Cyclone to win the game. One thing to note is I thought it was interesting, only 7 Bakugos in a, let's see, 37 plus 22, 59 plus 6, 65, minus your character, 64. So in a 64 card list, only 7 Bakugos. I know when my brother and I started playing Bakugo 3 at the beginning, my brother was playing him quite a bit. I kept telling him to put more Bakugos in, and we had the list up to like 12 Bakugos, and it just felt very, very clunky. When it worked, it really worked, but sometimes it was just drawing tons of Bakugos. So it looks like 7 might be the right answer here for the mix that you want. And at number 11, we have Tim Keefe on Death Bakugo 1. A lot of times when I think about Death Bakugo 1, Grenadier Bracers immediately comes to mind. You know, he is on the art after all. Really works well with this Foundation destruction plan to make these huge bomb attacks. But Tim is running Evil Gaze instead of Grenadier Bracers. When you think of Bracers, you're really thinking of an aggressive list. And Tim's list wasn't super aggressive. It was very down to play a long game and had a lot of tech pieces and a lot of board control pieces, Evil Gaze being one of those board control pieces. We saw Evil Gaze kind of leave the format with the rise of cards like Chivalrous Competitor, which, you know, these anti-Foundation destruction cards, but the Earth symbol feels like it's seeing less play than it used to see, and so maybe Evil Gaze is good to come back into the format. But you lose 2 health, you give it +2 or -2 speed. If it's blocked, you can destroy a rival Foundation. So on offense, you can say either you're going to really commit your resources out to block this attack, and then I'm going to selectively destroy your best defensive piece, or you're going to eat this poke, and then I can just build out and survive on your turn. Feels very, very nice, and it has Deadlock to boot. And here is the list. We can see that it's not a super aggressive list. We've more got Spooky, Apathetic, Learning the Standards, Stalking Her Prey, In Control, Desperate Struggle. We actually have a lot of defense here. One very interesting one was Confession, to make your rival not be able to sculpt their hand on your attacking turn. And I also found it interesting that Tim is only running 1 copy of Full Cowling Impact. This feels like it goes hand in hand with the Foundation Destruction game plan, but it is slow. Bakugo's not adding speed, so it's certainly understandable that Tim is only running 1 of it instead of more. I do like this addition of Red Riot Unbreakable to further break down your rival's stage. So you're saying, I'm not going to only break down my stage and leave yours untouched. Evil Gaze and Red Riot Unbreakable, we're going to be, and like Hardened Fist, we're going to be making you destroy Foundations just as much as me. And at number 10, we have Frank on Earth Overhaul. Frank is not running any copies of Homage to My Hero, which I found a little surprising since he's got a lot of Fury and Punch attacks in here to give the damage, and then Homage can be used to draw. But he is running Quick to Act, which can feel very nice in Overhaul, since Overhaul adds damage but not speed. We saw the Life Overhaul build do very well with an attack lineup that included Tongue Whip to stuff your opponent's card pool, and Back Alley Haymaker and Heroic Strike to stun the opponent out. Overhaul really needs help getting the speed. We've also seen Throw lists do quite well because they don't need speed. But here we have Quick to Act for when we get at less than half health, which can happen pretty easily with Earth Overhaul because Earth Overhaul plays a lot less defense than Life Overhaul. And then other than this, I'm not really seeing anything that, jumps off the list at me. Just looks like a lot of very solid Earth cards. I can't really argue with any of these choices. Very cool. We got 3 maximum Overhaul with the Hardened Chop, Hardened Jab, Hardened Frenzy, all going to be building things down. We're running a Faith Shield and a Red Guard. It's basically a what you would expect from an Earth list. And at number 9, we have William on Fire Rappa. And this list is almost identical to Jonah's list that Jonah topped with at the Gen Con RLE. I believe it was Gen Con. But there was a few changes made. I would say like 5 or 6 cards are different. And one of the changes is that Jonah was running Prehensile Tail at a 4 of, and William has taken it down to a 2 of, and is replaced with Season Brawler. Season Brawler being a spam foundation, easier to build, and it's just going to be able to draw if your opponent blocks with an attack, which most of the time your opponent's going to be holding their attacks and blocking with their attacks. So you're going to be getting that draw pretty reliably, and it's playable while committed. And Prehensile Tail works really well with Rappa, with bullet punches, putting things in momentum, and then you flip Prehensile Tail, you can grab that momentum into your hand. You can then use a card like Hardened Barrage to unflip your Prehensile Tail, and you can see where this is going, especially if you get 2 bullet punches and you put your second bullet punches, puts your first bullet punches in your momentum, and you grab it and you play it again, and now you're getting to play like a 6th or 7th copy of bullet punches that turn. It can get out of hand very, very quickly. But I'm assuming that, you don't really need 2 Prehensile Tails on stage. So my thinking is that William probably only wanted 1 on stage. 1 was good enough. you're trying to win on turn 2. This is a very, very draw heavy and aggressive list. You're using latent skill and big appetite to filter your hand, calling for backup to draw, seasoned brawler to draw, window shopping to be able to play from the top of your deck. Hopefully it's an attack. If it's a foundation, I don't think you have to play it. I think it says you may play it as your next form. So you can either know that you have a foundation on top or play it as a form if it's an attack. You have Sugar Rush power up to add the damage output that you need. And this is a list that can just absolutely blow you up on turn 2. And yeah, that was the main difference with Jonah's list, was a little bit less prehensile tail. Probably just don't need more than 2. And Seasoned Brawler does the trick just as well. And that is going to do it for me today. I will be back tomorrow with the top 8 deck lists.